We continue the afternoon with Kim Kielhofner from Canada. Afterwards, Wolfgang Lerner, living here in Vienna and traveling a lot. Vida Kuzmic from Zagreb, and Gabriele Sturm, living here but traveling a lot. And now we have another topic, research under the paradigm of translocality, which means traveling and researching about a certain topic or whatever, using or becoming more familiar with the place where you stay, or maybe feeling more like a stranger. I don't know how it is for you. Yes, go ahead, Kim.
Okay. The first thing you will see when you arrive is this.
Sorry.
No, this is correct.
Okay. I forgot, sorry.
In this, you can see all your expectations, all the things you have not yet experienced, all of the things you do not know. I am greeted by this in the building I am staying in. I took this picture because it was familiar to me, a reminder of a history present. Of course, arriving in a new place, I look for practices, routines that I recognize. I pay attention to signs, interactions, cues about how to navigate. And here is Johan, who is also watching, looking. Look at his eyes. I decide to take Johan with me. I can do this with a photo. I try to make a record of these events, of these experiences to take with me, to look at later. At the library, you are asked to leave all bags and coats in lockers outside. So you do not take the books with you. There is a barrier, a protection, a Johan, a ritual which needs to be satisfied. I buy this snack because I've never seen it before. It was not what I expected, and when an expectation is broken, I can begin to build. To build, it is necessary to take breaks. In the library, if you want to take a break, you must use one of these cards, no longer than 45 minutes. In a pause, I can begin to see a distance, a point, a structure on which to stand, like here, or here. After some time has passed, things seem to return to you. Here again is Johan in another form. Routines start to emerge. Here is the library again. This has become an important location. It's holding the story together. Here is another important location. This becomes part of my routine. I go at least twice a week. And when you establish a routine, you return to the same actions, the same locations, the same people. You become part of a system of movement. And when I am in movement, I can return to a pause in motion, which by another name is called wandering. And again I return. On each return, the space becomes wider. I can approach from another side. Some things remain unexplained, but we anticipate them anyways, even though we can't understand. I have to try and continue.
And this is a little essay about your visual and life experiences or research experiences here in Vienna.
Yeah.
Yeah. The next one is Wolfgang Lerner. He is I would say artist working with the camera, but the camera is a research instrument, and besides this, you're a graphic designer.
In a way,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. And so we have to change to the PDF document, I think.
So, as you can see, I'm not a graphic designer. No, I'm joking. I'm from Austria. I grew up on the countryside of Vienna, maybe the Balkan of Austria. And so I was always interested in the combination between living on the countryside, living on the border next to Hungary, what is to be an Austrian, where I can leave the country, and what's about living in Vienna. And one of these maybe identity issues with Vienna is that it was once a world city and now it's nothing. And we want to create like a slogan or anything what Vienna could be. And everybody in the art scene or in the financial scene talked about the Central Eastern capital, or the capital of Central Eastern Europe. And so I developed this project, Vienna, Central Eastern Europe, a couple years ago. And I was collecting all the former sister cities of Vienna, like Budapest, Zagreb, Prague, and so on, and collected like an image of a city Vienna could be, like short video clips from 5 to 10 seconds. And it was also more about a game, what can I remember? This could be Vienna, that could be the old central main station of Vienna. This is probably the Habsburg Yellow, which is in the Ukraine. And this was the final show in Vienna. And on the left I can see this video presentation with a 3-screen video installation with all of these 200 short videos, and it was played with a random image player, so nobody ever of the show had seen the same image, and in his or her mind they created their own city or their own vision of the Viennese of Central Eastern Europe. This was also a book. Here you can see the famous Viennese yellow, the color study in Bratislava. One of my other projects was about the so-called frontier of these metropolitan areas, or the polis. And so I had been to Athens, but it's never important where I go, because the image should be in this global anything, or the border between the local and the global. So Athens in my mind was always like a big city, but in fact it was 100 years ago just a village with 30,000 inhabitants. Now it's maybe the Los Angeles of Europe. You have like a metropolis about 3 or 4 million inhabitants with all problems and fortunes about a contemporary global city. And so I traveled, walked the whole city, maybe more the borderlines between the city and the countryside, and also the borders between city, culture, nature. This is like not a playground, a small hill on the, next to the seaside. You can see in the back the old military airport, which will build maybe in the couple of next 5 years to one of the most biggest real estate construction projects in Europe. Here you can see some images of this project. This image in the middle maybe reminds someone more to Mumbai than to Europe. Yeah. Then, because we are now here in like a presentation place, I also wanted to show some like presentations, like I had like made it in a book, like a photographic magazine, and in the last couple of years it's also important for me to show it on the web, so that you have like these small ideas, give it in a context and show it to the world. Then this is my last project. I've been this year 3 months to Mexico and 3 months to London. This is from Mexico City, and Mexico City, the name itself is like a construction from outsiders. The people there called it DF, Distrito Federal, until 3 years ago or 2 years ago. Now it's called Ciudad de Mexico. And like 500 years ago, it was called Teotihuacan. So it's always about an identity. What is the city about? It's local references. Also, like in Athens, I walked all these hills, so-called dangerous areas, or the most dangerous areas, and wanted to explore the endless city, one of the most largest metropolitan areas in the world. And compared to this nature somewhere in the suburbs, walking without a goal, I also explored the city as an art tourist or normal tourist. I just took on the hop-on, hop-off bus with the camera and shot about 5,000 images from the bus, because you have the perfect Google Street View and nobody will ever think about that it's not allowed to make a picture. So this is like this, acting in the real world in the eye of Google Street View. Yeah, this is the presentation of the last gallery show 1 month ago. Yeah, that's the link.
Okay, it seems a little bit like researching and afterwards showing that you weren't exactly there on this place, because some of these places look so common or could be on another venue. And Vida?
I will talk a little bit, maybe, yes. Just really simple and short, as this is like my second residency. My experience in being artist traveler is quite new. But the one thing that I noticed is that I'm kind of, when I come somewhere, I'm starting to perceive things and to do my production from zero. And this was kind of something that spontaneously happens. And just when I come to Vienna, I had like a Skype meeting with my mom, and I was like, it's a new situation, and I'm questioning like what to do, like how to start. And then she told me like, why don't you just kind of continue some of your projects that you are doing in Zagreb? And it was interesting because it didn't even cross my mind. So it's this type of reset is something that happens, which I found really interesting. And it's not that I'm not connecting these two places, but it's kind of, there are artists who work in a way that they connect different places with their own art practice, but for me it's more like accepting this shift perception and trying to get as much as I can from these new sensations, which is for me really important to question this role. Like, am I a tourist? I'm not a tourist because I'm at the artist residency. Am I just like a spectator? Am I observer? Especially if you have a chance to participate it in the way you want. I mean, at certain residencies you don't have to produce a work, or you can, and it's type of responsibility that you take as an artist. So this is just really simple. It was interesting, this book from Jonathan Crary. He's talking a lot about these differences between observer and spectator. And these are some things that I found interesting, especially when he's talking about 19th century and this mass production of image that is not painting anymore. It's like a photograph. And what does it mean, and how do you affect surrounding if you're like in front of the camera or behind the camera? And as I work with visual arts, I mainly produce images, like still images or moving images. For me, it was kind of interesting to think about what am I actually doing now. I always took my camera with me and my laptop, but for some reason it's quite difficult to film something in a new space, it doesn't have to be so different, because in a sense of visual perception, Vienna is not so different than Zagreb. Of course, it's much bigger, but it has like connected history. So, but some kind of responsibility of producing image happens to me that it's different, because back at home I work a lot community art, I work a lot with the questions of heritage, and like when you know what is behind the thing that you're dealing with and you know the background, then it's kind of easier to have a statement around it, because I think the image is just a representation. There is something around it and behind it, and when I change the location, then I'm kind of questioning, like, what is it? Is it like an aesthetical thing? What am I trying to put in it or out of it? So, like, I won't talk about my work, but like a really simple example. This is up there is a still from one of my recent videos that I did in Zagreb, and it's a lot about representation of certain characters that are my family characters. And this is a still from a video that I did here in Vienna. So I'm kind of trying to find the subject, because it's always about some experience that is connected with exchanging and communicating, firstly with people for me, and then like with the surroundings. So it changes my perspective in a sense that, like, after my first residency, I started to use a lot of digital images, in a sense of internet, found footage, I don't know how to call it, but kind of try to find this material that is widely spread, that is available, not to everybody, but to Western Europe or Western world, where I did my residencies for now. I'm sure it would be different if I would go somewhere else. So yeah, it's kind of, I'm trying to search for codes and this type of presentations that are more abstract. Yeah, is it a change or is it just a new direction? But it definitely affects my work.
Yeah, I thank you very much, because I think your presentation is very honest. You go back to, I would say, some production roots, or you ask what is the beginning of your production, and you didn't give us the headline searching for venues that can be described as feminist spaces or something like this. I think it's very exciting, and it's very open personally to put all these questions on the table. And we have very different characters here on the table. Gabriele Sturm is based in Vienna, but very obsessive, traveling and researching.
Researching, it's true. Traveling, it's always for a specific reason.
One of her jobs is she's a rapper and fast speaking now.
No, I'm not fast. In English, I'm not fast speaking. So, I would like to talk about objects that travel or already have traveled, not about my travel in the first place. A basic part of my work is to find the content of my projects in my immediate environment. My interest and questions arise by an impulse of my surrounding. For this stimulation, I travel nowhere. It is all in front of me. These objects lead me to follow their movements. Their formal, cultural, economic, political, and scientific background, all the way up to their point of origin. My work focuses on this analysis, but as well influencing surrounding factors. So may I take you on the journey of the tomato? I unpack tomatoes and read the place where they were planted on the packaging. The research on how far the tomatoes travel on average until they are offered in Austria revealed about 3,000 kilometers at the period of 2002 I started to 2007. Today the transport distance is probably even farther because the transport costs have become cheaper. So I always collect these boxes and look, I have now over 300. 3,000 kilometers. I tried to get the feeling, I tried to get the idea for the distance. So I wanted to witness the transport directly and to ride this route with a truck. Here, the journey itself was the destination. The research for the project was the truck ride itself. It was also about the processing of transporting goods, the working condition for the people in this field, which I wanted to experience through a direct witness. As a co-driver of over the 3,000 kilometers with 20 tons of tomatoes, the journey started in southern Turkey and ended at Großgrünmarkt Vienna-Inzersdorf. And during this ride, I simultaneously shared the process of the journey by constantly sending SMS. At this time it was to Neue Galerie Graz. They were displayed on their homepage during the show Unfair Trade in the Neue Galerie Graz 2007. So, and then, may I take you on a short trip of the journey of the feather. This project was a research at both ends of the trade chain and in two complete different contexts. The starting point was an invitation to make a project in Bremen. During my research activities, I suddenly saw feathers in a museum and I recognized the tail feathers, but I do not know the bird itself. Are my sensings fooling me? I have to know that. So I started to talk with people, started researching Bremen, Vienna, and so on, until I learned that this bird was a mass-traded commodity and its feathers were specially sought after. In the past, these feathers were commonly used as decoration on hats. Nowadays, you don't see them so often anymore. The heyday of trade was late 18th and early 19th century, and so on and so on. I tried to go back as far as possible on the timeline to understand the complex historical and cultural context. And having researched all this about the context in Europe from different sides and timelines, I was interested in the context of the bird of paradise at the end of the trading chain, the region of origin. And for that, I did go to BNG in order to take a different perspective, that of the people who lived in this country. The show afterwards, I named You Talk. It's Pidgin English and it means du sprichst, you talk. I started to collect the views of the people. I started to collect things and so on and so on. I will not talk too much about the journey, but today I learned that the feather is not making the journey anymore. Today it's the wood of the rainforest. The streets were built for it, so it will not grow again there in Papua New Guinea. And there's Mr. Tikil from WWF Bureau Madang, and they try to reforest, but it's very small there. And yeah, I went to different kind of office, to native speakers, also one EU office in Port Moresby. A lot of companies didn't want to talk to me, especially the fishing industry. They were afraid of an artist, like a journalist. Maybe they were right, I don't know. And today travels the tuna to the EU. The wood, the tuna, and the coffee and vanilla. So, thanks.
Now the challenge is to bring this together, or to find a platform for a discussion. And I have to say to the audience, I have to take care that I don't want to bring some too much personal things on the table, because I met you all. With some of you I'm a little bit familiar, but I have to tell you that Gabriele's work is really on the edge, because it's totally risky, and she invests nearly everything in her kind of traveling. and I visited her in winter in her apartment. It's totally cold, really, and you are thinking about traveling and researching, and what you said now, you don't will talk too much about the journey itself, but the journey
because
itself
I talk
is
too long.
yeah,
Just
yeah.
to catch the 3 minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
I
But your work is very obsessive. Wolfgang is I think you plan a lot before you do it, and what all of you try to focus a kind of, let's say, the reality of the local or whatever, but in different forms of, let's say, representations. Because as far as I can say, Kim, wherever you researching or looking around or doing your observations, everything becomes systematic in a way. Your photos are systematically, it's a language of many systems, so there are totally different results. But to go ahead with the discussion, in 3 words, tell us something about how you organize your trips, long-term trips, because now this was going to the Caribbean.
Yes, this I had to organize I have to organize more than half a year, because it is in PNG. It's very difficult to travel alone, especially as a woman. And so I have to build a network before, and internet is not very common there, also electricity, so it was really very difficult, and I have to find different ways of, there are organizers who help to develop, or church organization or something like this. I have to try to go over them, and building my network before, and it was really took a very long time, and I was at the beginning very afraid to go there, because the level of violence is so high there, because of the logging companies. They pay the people, especially the Chinese logging companies, pay the people with weapons, and the people lose their home when they cut the rainforest off, and then they start to drink, and then they have weapons. So it is at the moment not a very peaceful possibility to stay or to travel, and there are roadblocks. So I thought, my God, and I was talking to a lot of people who work there, and so it was really difficult. This journey, this trip to PNG took a lot of organization. And the other one was not so complicated, because I was at Großgrünmarkt Vienna all the time, not all the time, but a lot. To talk
the large
there to
market for fruits in Vienna,
where they are selling fruits and vegetables in mass for the shops. And I was talking a lot to the business owners, to the drivers, where they come from, where they go to. I made drawings with them, because they couldn't speak English or German, and I couldn't speak Turkey or Libysh or or Syrish. It was very difficult to talk, so we always drawed, and it was very funny. And I was visiting the drivers a lot and talked to them. And then when I wanted to do the journey, because I had the possibility, Günter Holler-Schuster suggested me to Peter Weibel, because he did know about my work, and I had the possibility to drive and simultaneously send SMS. I asked one of the driver who went this distance if he could take with me, if he could give me a call, because I didn't want to drive with him 5 to 6 weeks, first to Tiflis to bring Austrian salami, and then back to the south of Turkey to come up to Vienna with tomatoes. And I just wanted the distance of 3,000 kilometers, and so it was very difficult to manage to find a driver who was For him, it was okay,
okay,
to phone him, but this was
yeah.
very quick
Okay,
organized.
there's a lot. There are a lot of logistics
Yes.
and let's say preparings are necessary to do this, and what the topic of your research is social economic in a wider sense, but I think it goes too far to talk about the way she shows this in her exhibition, but it's not documentary in a traditional sense.
No.
It's more the opening of a field of many meanings that communicate together. And from this, I want to come to Wolfgang because I hope this doesn't lead us in the wrong route, but in a way you are dealing with a kind of mythology or with images we have in our head. Sometimes it's very difficult to identify where you made a photo, because you said Zagreb and Vienna is totally similar, and so.
Yeah, for this project, this was like the goal, to play with this like stereotypes of Viennese architecture. But if I'm talking about my like bigger topic, the world city, then there is a quote of Rem Koolhaas that every city now is the same. Maybe Singapore is the city without a face. Every airport looks the same. In 20 years, every city, every downtown will look the same. So it plays with this similarity and the transformation of these global cities, which are quite similar problems, similar sizes around the world. And the mystic, or like
but
the...
is this true?
Yes
that
and no.
Everything becomes more and more similar.
Of course. If you go to London, it doesn't look really different to New York. But it looks different to Vienna, because Vienna, in my kind of sense, is not that global city. But, but if I'm working in Mexico City or in London, it's totally different the way I'm walking or the way I'm interacting with the city. Because London for me is the city that started the globalization. So for me it's a really straightforward city. You have like this, the project is called the standard city. A lot of like global norms are from there. The time is from there. Everybody has it on his own pulse, +1, -1. And so in London, for example, I walked the whole Meridian line from north to south, from the highway route M25 to south. It was a journey about 8 days, but it was not that risky in your trips. And maybe the similarities are why our work, or my work, shouldn't be looked as a documentary work, or like
this
project.
is what I wanted to ask you. Your approach is more coming from, let's say, philosophy of globalization, or the architecture and so, or the images of a city. With which kind of vision do you start for when you start a project? Have you an idea how it could end?
Of course, I have some ideas. I'm writing it down. I have like my project folders on my computer, and then, like now, the 3 months in Mexico and London, the first month was just exploring all the art museum, all the communities, just walking around without any stress. Then I ordered my ideas, which idea could work, which new idea could start. Then I tried to work for 1 month, and then I'm looking what is missing and how I can give it to a better result. And a lot of times I go afterwards a second time to the city, and so it was just a starting point, this so-called artist in residency. So it's like a first deeper impact into a city, and if you like it, if you find your goals on the way, then you will come back and look for anything new. For example, in Mexico City, I did my civil service instead of the military service in Nicaragua and met a lot of people there, and also like in this diplomatic world around the world. And so it was easy for me to find somebody in Mexico, for example, an old friend who had time enough to walk with me all these hills from Mexico.
Are you speaking Spain?
Yeah.
Okay. Kim, your approach is for me a little bit like a writer, or a little bit sometimes Kybernetic, what you do with pictures and language, because you try to draw associations from one picture to another, from language to language. We were talking about the filmmaker Chris Marker and the film Sans Soleil, because I was thinking about this in the beginning when she started with the black pig, and even your presentation looked a little bit, gave us the impression that this is a kind of work with a text, a little bit like literature. What's the combination of language, venue, and visual image in your work?
Yeah, that's exactly. I always try to, instead of talking about my experience in Vienna, I wanted to do something where I felt like I was actually showing you like my process rather than talking about it. Do you know what I mean? Like, so you could actually see it, then rather than me saying this is what I do. That's my purpose.
Would you say, like in this short presentation, that visual image and text is complementary?
Yeah, I always use the language and image. I play with the two, I guess. They connect or they don't connect, or you can connect it, or sometimes you don't see the connection, or yeah, it's always a thing I'm playing with.
Is there a lifestyle difference between Canada and Vienna? In these panels, sometimes I have the impression that there's more difference between, let's say, Bosnia or Serbia and Vienna than some cities in Canada and Vienna.
I suppose there's a lot of similarities. Yeah, it's very similar actually, except, you know, it's German.
But you started a strange project. You started a research project regarding an Austrian writer. I'm not sure if all people here in the audience know this, but you started to research on Marianne Fritz, and even here in Austria, people who like literature are not so familiar with her.
Yeah, her books are out of print in German. They're hard to, you can get them at the library, but they're not in circulation.
Mm-hmm.
But she recently, 2 years ago, her first book was translated into English, and I was at the library, I picked it up. So, who is this? Never heard of her. Read it, and then I got interested, and then I just knew I had to research her. I went, this is my path. I ordered her books on the internet and applied for this residency.
So it became a kind of, let's say, obsessive research, because you try to find all people who were in contact with her or dealing with her work?
I didn't try to find all the people, but I mean, I was able to visit her apartment, which is preserved by her partner. It's all her files, her research, her maps, her photos. It's an experience. I recommend it.
Yeah, to include you, Vida, you don't want to talk or you don't want to continue, but you started with some research projects here in Vienna, or not? Or is it too much to say this?
I don't have a title for it, or I don't call it, but because my ideas before I came here changed, and this is the thing, I kind of allowed myself to just to be driven by something that I kind of observe at the moment, so I wasn't strict about the thing that I proposed. Which is great that you don't have to necessarily be, because some things that I was thinking about seemed a little bit irrelevant when I came to the certain situation, and like on this basic level I was attracted to other topics. And yeah, it's a beginning of some investigation on the production of digital image and about the light, about colors, and about these basic tools that make something visible and possible to circulate and to represent different subjects.
In Zagreb, you are part of a network of friends, maybe some family members or so. Here in Vienna, not so much. Does this exchange your perception in general?
Yes and no. I mean, in Zagreb, I'm involved in 2 different collectives, so I work a lot in a collective art practices, which I really like. But this type of opportunity is great because I can focus like on the things. It's different, the process is different when you need to collaborate and when you need to make a lot of compromises. It can be more fun, but you lack of something. This social aspect is of course super important, so yeah. I think 3 months is not enough to get in a collaboration that I would get in probably if I would stay somewhere longer, but yeah, I see art production. My own art production has to be connected with real life in a sense. I mean, the product itself, I mean, the final piece can be anything, but the process is necessarily connected to any kind of exchange.
But Zagreb is more or less around the corner. And Wolfgang, you said these cities are so similar, maybe of the architectural frame of the 19th century in the context of the monarchy, and a lot of let's say local post-socialistic topics are deleted. What is let's say, what are was sind die Spezialitäten? What are the special topics in such a city which is so near to Vienna? Or do you want to show that everything is quite equal?
Could be the same if not this and that happened, because 100 years ago it was more similar than now, but then we had like the communists. Architecturally, the language totally different. If you go to Bratislava, which is like the next sister city of Vienna from the distance, there is a highway through the first district. Next to the cathedral, you have like the big highway. That's like unbelievable for Viennese people. But if you go out of the train station in Zagreb, for example, you think you are at the Schloss Schönbrunn. Like it's exactly the same. Maybe the size is just a half of that. Then, what else? I don't know. Some in my point of view, from the Viennese Western European view, maybe some Eastern European countries have developed more Western than Vienna. There had been this way to this westernization. Capitalism is more directly, there are more Tescos in the center of Slovakia than in Vienna. There's maybe, the change was totally over the years.
But my question is, you're traveling with a certain kind of concept in your head. Do you think it can be possible that you find a kind of irritation or a moment that is completely different from your vision? For example, when you plan a journey to Mexico City and you have the vision of a certain kind of photo project, and there you see everything is completely different.
I had been to Mexico City. There was not really a big new experience. But for example, in Sarajevo, there are the trams from Vienna. And maybe that's funny, or that's like this switch in your head. If you take your camera, make just a point of this and that corner, it could really look like in Vienna. If you're just looking for like frames in another city, you can give the New York image to Vienna. You can walk in the 3rd district on several parts, and you have like the old, how was the theater in the 3rd district called? Which was long. Sophiensäle was long construction site. It was really messed up, and it looked like a corner in Havana, for example. If you want to have the image for a film set, and in the film industry, a lot of films are not used to produced in New York. They played like in Mexico City because it's
Kohlhaas. And what do you want to show in your work? That everything comes together, or do you deal with the mythology of cities?
It's more the question about, is it the same, or in which city could be this image of this so-called global anything? So it's more about giving the viewer the idea of a fictional city which is like part of this global world city context. It's totally the same with the contemporary art world. Everybody's just talking about Paris, about maybe disorder, New York, London, Paris, and then some other cities. So you have maybe also an economy, just these 3 bigger cities, which are since the last 200 years the top of this global cosmopolitanism, thinking, culture, economically.
And putting this question back to the audience.
And
and why is it necessary for you to travel? You could do a lot of research by internet or whatever, but what does this personal experience mean for you?
It's a very big difference, because like for example the number of 3,000, it's an abstract number, and I don't have a really picture what it means to be traveled, in the case of tomato, to be traveled 3,000 kilometers for a quick consumption. And I like to go very much to make my own picture of it, and to fill the research with pictures and with my subjective way of understanding, so that I can communicate it in another way. Because the research is always very abstract, normally, and this one at the right with the truck, I wanted to understand this abstract house number, how it really look like and how the processing is going. You can't find it so directly. You got a puzzle of different pieces, but there are always missing some. And in PNG it was really crazy that you nearly only found the perspective of the European scientists or the colonial powers, and never the perspective of what the people think there, or what the bird of paradise for them has the meaning, or what they think at the other end of the trade chain. Mm-hmm. And I wanted also to pick up where I went back in timeline from the first Birds of Paradise came with the discovery of the new countries at the 15th, 16th century. Mm-hmm. And it was very important to go back in timeline to understand why it was important in Europe and why I know the feathers and not the bird. Mm-hmm. But it was always the view of the Europeans, and I wanted to compare this context of Europe with the context of the other end of the trade chain, and so I had to go there. And I was more...
And for this, your own body experience is important.
Yes, also to talk to the people, because I can ask the question I want. Mm-hmm. And of course I have a concept when I go there, and I can't do everything I want, because I was depending on the people. I couldn't move there alone. So I went to places I didn't
you try
expect.
to go deeper and deeper,
yes.
And you try to interpret, let's say, surfaces.
Yeah, but also like the ways, I also like your idea about going in real life, in real time, and that was also my idea about this Viennese Central Eastern Europe project, because I went travel with Eurolines. There is a hub in Vienna for this kind of bus destinations, and yeah, so I'd been to Sarajevo with the bus, to Zagreb with the bus.
To switch back to you, Kim, your approach is more linguistic and poetic, I would say, and you met let's say, people of the Marianne Fritz community, or people who were familiar with her, and on the other hand, you had the possibility to read only one text or more. What kind of cultural experience is this?
Cultural experience?
Yeah, yes, or experience with the people here. I have the imagination that you went very deep into the local, in one part of a special local scene.
I don't know if I went that deep into a local scene. I met some people from Fritz Punk, the theater collective that's local. But it's really her world that I'm interested in, Marianne Fritz's world. And that's what I was...
I don't know anything about your entire artistic work, but I think you're working very systematic, and it looks like a linguistic work on a visual surface.
I don't know if I'm working that systematically. It feels random to me.
It's just every day.
Yeah, every day. It's like a process. It's every day.
Yeah, coming back a last time to you, Vida, because I like the way you ask on a, let's say, very simple level how to go on, how to do the next work or whatever, because in Zagreb you are you said in 2 communities, yeah, and What was important for you to come to Vienna? Because it's so near from the mentality.
Yeah, I'm not after. I don't have this type of focus. I would like to go here and there, and of course, traveling is always, like, I mean, it's the best possible experience that you can get, and especially if you're doing with an aim to do an artwork. But I mean, honestly, like, it's a residency that is supporting artists for 3 months, and I mean, I think everybody would like to be part of it. I mean, it's a great opportunity just to, because I mean, there is like art scene in Zagreb, and lots of things are happening, but in the level of, not informal, but a lot of things are self-organized. There is a really nice community of people working together, but not a lot of chances for bigger productions. I mean, there are limits that you kind of reach at some point. And just being in a different, it doesn't have to be a different city in a sense, even though Vienna is much different than Zagreb in terms of multiculturality, and Zagreb is still like Croatian country. I mean, the most of the people are Croatians there. So I think it's always a shift. It's just the matter of one's perception. For me, I mean, I did a lot of projects outside Zagreb in small places, and even that is a big shift for me when I'm working with locals in different parts of the rural country. So it's, I mean, yeah, these type of projects are something that are giving a chance. I mean, what was Mila talking, the previous panel? It's hard to say anything bad. I mean, it's a super opportunity because as an artist, I mean, especially maybe from the eastern part of the Europe and from a lot of different places, it's not, you can't actually, live from it. So you need to do a lot of different jobs to support yourself. And this time, there is time for production. We kind of always are after deadlines. We can cover some things from state support and city support, which is still happening. Maybe it won't be happening in a few years, but there is no really time for this pre-production phase, for research, for reading, for kind of trying to digest different materials to get something out of you. And this is...
Gabriele, you had, as far as I remember, a residency in Hungary or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, but usually you act more than a, let's say, artistic entrepreneur. Or
what's an entrepreneur?
An Unternehmer.
So, okay.
Yeah. Oh, it sounds very fine, but it means that you organize a lot of projects under very risky conditions.
Yeah, to be at the residency is a big difference because it's like to be very cozy. You have you're in an institution. On the trip with the truck or in PNG, I was on my own. I organized it myself. The money I got from Bundeskanzleramt for a flight and to stay there, so it was very good. And but I have to organize. I want to know something, so I want to follow the movement of the object. So I told the journey of the objects, and so there is no residency where I want to go. But next year I am in Indonesia, and the feathers. Indonesia, yes, and the feathers are always also a theme there. So there is a few residencies which have a place of interest for me where I can do the research I want to. But
Indonesia is a residency or not?
Yes, there is a residency next year, yes. And I can stay there 3 months, but normally I want to know something, and then, like an entrepreneur, I have to organize it on myself completely from zero to. Also the safety, it's very complicated. If you go without an institution, you're to organize your own safety. You have to think how you will deal with it and how you manage and how you organize it. So it means a lot of more organization.
But it seems like a very huge, let's say, exploration project for a little exhibition or a little photo book or whatever, and you're 3 months on the road for this.
Yes, no, there are several exhibitions coming out.
Okay.
Yes, and I always pick up a theme again when there is something. Also with the tomato, when I am invited with this project, I always make a new part for it also. So, and from the feather, from my trip to PNG, I have so much material. So I had made. There are some exhibitions, not only one, and still a book is missing. When I will
And
have
Kim,
time,
had you any idea of the outcome of your meetings or coming closer to Marianne Fritz as a very significant writer, but not touchable in any way?
I think I've gotten more from this trip than I ever expected.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah. Materials and just experience.
So a lot of input for forthcoming works,
Yeah.
however
This is
in
like
which direction it
research.
will go.
I'll work on this in the future for a long time.
I have no real significant idea how to end this. Wolfgang, maybe you can tell us something about post-production of your projects, because you are the one here around who organized some, let's say, large exhibitions in more or less spaces that we could call a little bit alternative, not so. Gabriele invests a lot in her projects, and then sooner or later they become institutional. But you show many, or you organize many exhibitions under total different conditions.
Yeah, there had been several shows with the same curator who is now my gallerist, so it was more a process in the making, and it was more about, because we didn't have the spaces, and so we looked for some free space in vacant buildings, like Berggasse number 9, I think. It's like a really huge building with a big space, about 700 square meters, and we got the opportunity to make a show there. And there are some spaces which had been art spaces, like the former BAWAG Contemporary. I had like a big show there, but it was like after the official time of the funded art space from BAWAG. And for this, the Wittgenstein House is like a famous building outside of Vienna, but in Vienna it's almost not on the radar of the
The Wittgenstein House, the building in the 3rd district.
Yeah, I think I showed there, but it's not the off space in a way, but maybe it's but more some smaller things.
It's
but
owned by like the Bulgarian or Romanian?
It's the Bulgarian Cultural Institute.
Yeah.
And it's like a really strict.
But when you start such projects, you plan it from the beginning till the exhibition situation.
Going with the flow on the project. For example, now the Mexico project, I will have a book presentation in February in Mexico, And so I'm also looking for a show. And I'm meeting yesterday with the Cultura Attaché of Mexico, like the Mexican embassy in Vienna, and she's in contact with the culture minister there for looking for free space, like some government building in downtown Mexico City, that they can get some spaces, just the window spaces in these empty buildings for a presentation, like a poster show of my image work of the last Mexico City project. And it's going like from one contact to the other one, and but some small parts. Never expect anything from somebody, but at least you can try it. So it's a lot of writing emails to everybody, and it's more like also this artist in residence is more like a lottery, but at least it's cheaper and you have more chance to win. And I was a lot of times in luck, so
Yeah.
maybe that's also not a Viennese or Austrian.
It's a little bit like a lottery, and Kim said the input was more than she expected. And how was it for you? Is there something you could bring to the point? What shifts your work, or something that brings you back to Vienna, or some significant experiences?
Yeah, I wouldn't point anything out, like everything.
Yeah.
Everything works. It's really well organized in a sense of having this freedom to not be pushed. I don't think all the residences are like that. Sometimes you really need to be precise on what are you doing and how are you doing it, and do something quite open and public and defined, but in a context of the city itself and what it offers in a sense of culture and music and theater and fine art and visual art. It's really, I mean, it's a lot. It doesn't have, I think it's a great surrounding because there is no a lot of fuss about it, but a lot of things are happening and they're really available to consume in these circumstances of these 3 months. So yeah, bits and pieces of a lot of interesting stuff that I still need to kind of digest.
These two panels had a little bit an experimental character because we tried to put something on the table that isn't communicated normally. Because what I tried, or what we tried, was to look a little bit behind the curtain. Because for all of us, it's part of the business to travel, to change the place, to go to another venue, work there or so. But this was, let's say, an experimental way to reflect this a little bit in our contemporary context. And like after the first panel, I have no very effectful closing idea how to close this panel. Hopefully it was fruitful for some of us. I thank you all very, very much, and the organizers. Thank you to all people who are part of Kulturkontakt to make this possible, and for all who were coming to these little panels.
Thank you.